Have you ever noticed your mind almost never gives you real peace anymore? Even when life becomes quiet, something inside you keeps talking. From the moment you wake up in the morning until the moment you finally fall asleep at night, the noise never fully stops. Overthinking, fear, pressure, imaginary conversations, regret about the past, anxiety about the future. The mind keeps replaying old memories while you are trying to rest. It keeps creating problems that have not even happened yet. It turns simple moments into emotional exhaustion. And after listening to this inner voice for so many years, you slowly began believing the voice was who you are. That is the frightening part. Most people never realize they are trapped inside their own mind. They think they are seeing life clearly, when in reality, they are seeing everything through fear, insecurity, overthinking, and non-stop mental noise. Even peaceful moments no longer feel peaceful because the mind refuses to stay silent. And the longer this continues, the more emotionally disconnected people become from themselves, from life, and from the present moment. But Buddhism teaches something deeply unsettling. The real prison was never the world around you. The real prison was the voice inside your head that you never learned to question, a voice that quietly controls your emotions, steals your peace, and shapes your entire reality without you even noticing it. And once you finally see that clearly, your entire life begins changing from the inside out. Have you ever noticed your mind almost never gives you real peace anymore? Even when life becomes quiet, something inside you keeps talking. From the moment you wake up in the morning until the moment you finally fall asleep at night, the noise never fully stops. Overthinking, fear, pressure, imaginary conversations, regret about the past, anxiety about the future. The mind keeps replaying old memories while you are trying to rest. It keeps creating problems that have not even happened yet. It turns simple moments into emotional exhaustion. And after listening to this inner voice for so many years, you slowly began believing the voice was who you are. That is the frightening part. Most people never realize they are trapped inside their own mind. They think they are seeing life clearly, when in reality, they are seeing everything through fear, insecurity, overthinking, and non-stop mental noise. Even peaceful moments no longer feel peaceful because the mind refuses to stay silent. And the longer this continues, the more emotionally disconnected people become from themselves, from life, and from the present moment. But Buddhism teaches something deeply unsettling. The real prison was never the world around you. The real prison was the voice inside your head that you never learned to question, a voice that quietly controls your emotions, steals your peace, and shapes your entire reality without you even noticing it. And once you finally see that clearly, your entire life begins changing from the inside out. The mind never stops talking, because silence threatens the illusion it built around you. Most people believe they are afraid of being alone. But the truth is much deeper than that. What they are really afraid of is sitting alone with their own mind, because silence removes all distraction. And the moment distraction disappears, the mind is finally forced to face everything it has been trying to escape. This is why so many people constantly surround themselves with noise, without even realizing it. The television is always on. The phone is always in their hand. Music is always playing. Scrolling never stops. Even when people wake up in the morning, many immediately reach for distraction before they even face themselves. Because the moment life becomes quiet, something uncomfortable begins rising inside. Old memories suddenly return. Regret starts speaking. Loneliness becomes louder, fear appears, unhealed emotions begin moving to the surface, and the mind does not like this feeling at all. So it quickly creates noise again. It starts thinking non-stop. It creates imaginary conversations. It replays painful moments from years ago. It worries about situations that have not even happened yet. It predicts failure. It searches for problems. It keeps talking endlessly because deep inside, the mind believes constant thinking is protecting you. But most of the time, it is not protecting you at all. It is only keeping you distracted from yourself. This is why some people cannot even sit quietly for a few minutes without becoming restless. The moment silence appears, they suddenly feel uncomfortable in their own presence. And this discomfort reveals something important. Many people have spent their entire lives running away from themselves mentally, not physically. Mentally, they have never truly learned how to simply sit, breathe, and exist without needing constant mental stimulation. The mind became addicted to movement, always chasing, always analyzing, always reacting, always escaping the present moment. Because stillness feels unfamiliar, and what feels unfamiliar often feels dangerous to the ego. Buddhism teaches that the human mind creates endless noise because silence threatens the false identity it spent years building. An identity built from fear, an identity built from comparison, an identity built from past pain, social pressure, and emotional survival. The ego wants to stay busy because busyness prevents awareness. If the mind keeps talking loudly enough, you may never stop long enough to question it. You may never notice how many of your fears are imagined. You may never notice how many thoughts are automatic patterns repeating every day. You may never notice how rarely you are truly living in the present moment. And this is the hidden prison most people never see. They think the problem is life itself, but often, the real problem is the non-stop mental noise happening between them and reality. A beautiful moment happens, but the mind is somewhere else. A peaceful day appears, but the mind keeps searching for danger. Someone loves them, but the mind keeps replaying old heartbreak. Life keeps moving in front of them, while the mind keeps trapping them inside invisible stories. This is why Buddhism places so much importance on awareness and silence, because silence exposes the mind. And once the mind becomes visible, its control slowly weakens. The moment you begin observing your thoughts, instead of automatically believing them, something powerful starts happening. You begin realizing that not every thought deserves your attention, not every fear deserves your obedience, not every emotion tells the truth. And slowly, for the first time in a long time, a small space begins appearing between you and the noise inside your head. That small space is important, because inside that space, peace quietly begins returning, not because the mind completely disappears, but because you are no longer completely trapped inside it. Most of your suffering comes from the stories the mind creates, not from reality itself. One of the deepest truths in Buddhism is this: most human suffering is not created by reality itself. It is created by the mind's interpretation of reality. This is why two people can go through the same situation, yet experience completely different emotional pain inside. One person faces difficulty and remains calm. The other becomes mentally destroyed. The event may be the same, but the story inside the mind is different. And most people never realize how much their inner stories control their emotions. The mind is constantly creating meanings, constantly judging, constantly assuming, constantly predicting disaster before anything has even happened. A small problem appears, and the mind immediately turns it into catastrophe. One mistake becomes, my life is falling apart. One rejection becomes, nobody will ever love me. One failure becomes, I am worthless. One bad moment becomes, everything is ruined. The mind rarely sees reality clearly. Instead, it adds fear to reality. It adds memory to reality. It adds insecurity to reality. And after repeating these mental stories enough times, the stories begin feeling more real than life itself. This is why many people suffer even during peaceful moments. Nothing dangerous is happening. Nobody is attacking them. The present moment is actually safe. Yet inside their mind, there is chaos, because the suffering is not coming from reality anymore. It is coming from imagination. The mind keeps creating painful futures that do not exist yet. It keeps replaying painful memories that already ended. It keeps inventing rejection, failure, embarrassment, loss over and over again. And slowly, the body begins reacting to imagined pain as if it were truly happening. This is why overthinking becomes exhausting. The mind places the body into constant emotional stress, even while sitting alone in a quiet room. Buddhism teaches that thoughts are temporary mental events. They are not permanent truth, but most people never question their thoughts. If the mind says, "You are behind in life," they believe it immediately. If the mind says, "You are not enough," they carry that pain all day long. If the mind says, "Something terrible is going to happen," fear immediately takes control of the body. The mind becomes believable because awareness is asleep. And when awareness is asleep, thoughts quietly become reality. This is why so many people spend years suffering from problems that only exist inside mental stories. The mind creates fear, then reacts to the fear it created. The mind creates insecurity, then searches for evidence to support it. The mind creates emotional pain, then convinces you the pain defines who you are. And after enough repetition, people stop seeing life clearly. They only see life through the filter of fear, memory, anxiety, and emotional conditioning. A person compliments them, but the mind focuses on one criticism instead. Life gives them beauty, but the mind searches for danger. Peace appears, but the mind distrusts it and waits for something bad to happen. This is the hidden suffering of the human mind. It cannot stay in reality for long. It constantly escapes into stories. Stories about the future, stories about other people, stories about failure, stories about not being enough. And many of these stories are not even true. Yet people build their identity around them. Buddhism teaches something incredibly freeing. A thought is only powerful when you unconsciously believe it. The moment you step back and observe the thought, its power begins weakening. Now, instead of saying, "My life is hopeless," you begin noticing, "The mind is creating hopeless thoughts right now." That small shift changes everything, because now you are no longer fully trapped inside the story. Now awareness has entered, and awareness breaks illusion. The more conscious you become, the more clearly you begin seeing that the mind has been narrating reality non-stop for years, not always truthfully, not always wisely, just automatically, like an old machine repeating patterns it learned long ago. And this realization can feel shocking at first, because you begin seeing how many emotions were created by mental interpretation rather than reality itself. How many fears were imagined. How many sleepless nights came from thoughts that never became true. How much pain came from resisting life instead of simply experiencing it. But this realization is also deeply freeing, because if the mind created much of the suffering, then awareness can slowly end it, not by forcing thoughts away, not by fighting the mind, but by finally seeing thoughts for what they truly are. Temporary mental stories passing through awareness, nothing more. And the moment you stop treating every thought like absolute truth, the mind slowly loses its power to control your peace. The mind keeps replaying old pain, because familiar suffering feels safer than the unknown. One of the strangest things about the human mind is that it often chooses familiar pain over unfamiliar peace. Even when suffering hurts deeply, the mind still returns to it again and again. This is why some people replay the same heartbreak for years. Why old rejection still hurts long after the moment has passed. Why painful memories suddenly appear late at night when everything becomes quiet. Why certain words, certain places, certain songs can instantly pull someone back into emotions they thought they had already escaped. The mind has a powerful attachment to familiarity. Even painful familiarity can feel safer than the unknown, because the unknown feels uncertain, and uncertainty makes the mind uncomfortable. So instead of moving forward into something new, the mind keeps returning to old emotional patterns it already understands. It keeps reopening old wounds, not because it wants healing, but because suffering has become familiar territory. The mind knows how to survive there. This is why many people unconsciously stay connected to their past pain. They continue replaying old conversations in their head. They imagine different endings. They relive betrayal. They repeat moments where they felt abandoned, embarrassed, rejected, or unloved. And slowly, the pain stops feeling like an experience. It starts feeling like identity. A person no longer says, "I experienced heartbreak." Now they begin feeling, "I am broken." They no longer say, I went through rejection. Now they feel, I am unworthy. This is how suffering quietly becomes part of the self. And once pain becomes identity, letting go starts feeling dangerous. Because deep inside, the mind begins asking, if I release this pain, then who will I be without it? This is why healing scares many people more than suffering itself. Because suffering may hurt, but at least it feels familiar. At least the mind understands it. The unknown requires trust. The unknown requires change. And the ego fears change, because change threatens the identity it spent years building. Buddhism teaches that attachment is the root of suffering, and many people think attachment only means attachment to pleasure, people, money, or success. But sometimes, the deepest attachment is attachment to emotional pain, attachment to victimhood, attachment to sadness, attachment to emotional chaos, attachment to the story of being damaged. Some people become so emotionally connected to their suffering, they no longer know how to exist without it. The mind keeps saying, remember what happened to you. Remember how they hurt you. Remember how life disappointed you. And because these thoughts repeat constantly, the nervous system begins living inside old pain even when the painful moment is already gone. The body moves into the future, but the mind stays trapped in the past. And this creates a silent emotional prison. A person may smile externally while internally still carrying years of unresolved emotional weight, still carrying old anger, old shame, old grief, old fear. Buddhism teaches that the mind suffers because it clings. It clings to memories, it clings to identity, it clings to emotional wounds. And the more tightly the mind holds on to pain, the heavier life begins feeling. This is why some people cannot fully enjoy peaceful moments. Even when life becomes calm, the mind searches for old suffering again. Peace starts feeling unfamiliar. And because peace feels unfamiliar, the mind unconsciously returns to emotional chaos it already recognizes. This is one of the saddest traps of human consciousness. People become addicted to emotional suffering without realizing it, not because they enjoy pain, but because pain became psychologically familiar. And familiar things create the illusion of safety. But Buddhism teaches something deeply freeing. You are not your pain. You are not your wounds. You are not the worst thing that happened to you. Those experiences affected your life, but they are not the deepest truth about who you are. Pain visited you. It is not you. And healing begins the moment you stop building your identity around suffering. The moment you stop feeding old memories with constant attention, their emotional grip slowly weakens, not instantly, but slowly, like a fire fading when wood is no longer added to it. This does not mean pretending the pain never happened. It means no longer worshipping the pain every single day inside your mind. It means allowing the past to finally become the past. And this is where true emotional freedom quietly begins. Not when memories disappear completely, but when they no longer control your identity, your peace, and your future. Because the moment awareness becomes stronger than attachment, the mind slowly stops living inside old wounds. And for the first time in a long time, the heart begins making space for peace again. The more you fight your thoughts, the more power you secretly give them over your life. Most people spend their entire lives fighting their own mind. They fight fear, they fight anxiety, they fight sadness, they fight overthinking, they fight unwanted thoughts that appear suddenly inside their head. And because of this constant inner battle, they become mentally exhausted. What most people do not realize is that the mind becomes stronger the moment you begin fighting every thought it creates. Because whatever receives constant attention receives energy. This is why the thoughts you fear most often become the thoughts that control you the longest. The more frightened you become by a thought, the more attention you give it, and the more attention you give it, the more important the mind believes it must be. So the mind repeats it again and again and again. This is why overthinking feels endless. A fearful thought appears, then another thought immediately starts fighting it. One part of the mind creates fear, Another part tries to remove the fear. Then another thought judges you for having the fear in the first place, and suddenly, your entire inner world becomes a battlefield. This is why so many people feel emotionally drained even when they have done nothing physically difficult all day. Their body may be resting, but their mind has been fighting non-stop for hours. Fighting imaginary situations, fighting painful memories, fighting future problems that have not happened, fighting emotions they do not want to feel. The human mind becomes trapped in endless resistance. But Buddhism teaches something deeply surprising. Peace does not come from controlling every thought. Peace comes from changing your relationship with thoughts, because thoughts themselves are not the true problem. Attachment to thoughts is the problem. Resistance to thoughts is the problem. Fear of thoughts is the problem. Most thoughts are temporary mental movements. They rise, stay briefly, then disappear. But when you panic over them, you hold them in place. Imagine trying to push water down with your hands. The harder you push, the more resistance you create. The mind works the same way. The more desperately you try not to think something, the more attention the mind gives to it. This is why people who constantly say, "I must stop overthinking," often overthink even more, because now the mind has become obsessed with monitoring itself, constantly checking, constantly controlling, constantly reacting, and this creates even more mental noise. Buddhism teaches a different path, not suppression, not mental violence, not endless inner fighting, awareness, observation, stillness. Instead of attacking every thought, you begin watching thoughts quietly. A fearful thought appears, and instead of panicking, you simply notice it. An anxious thought appears, and instead of fighting it, you allow it to pass through awareness without feeding it. This changes everything, because now the thought is no longer receiving emotional fuel, and thoughts without emotional fuel slowly lose strength, like a fire that slowly fades when wood is no longer added to it. Most people accidentally keep their thoughts alive by reacting to them constantly. The mind says, "What if something goes wrong?" And immediately the body enters fear. Then the mind says, "Why are you thinking like this?" And now shame appears too. Then another thought says, "You will never find peace." And the cycle continues. This is how unconscious thinking traps people for years, not because thoughts are all powerful, but because people automatically believe and react to every thought that enters the mind. Buddhism teaches that thoughts are like clouds moving through the sky. Some clouds are dark, some are heavy, some bring emotional storms, but no cloud stays forever. The sky itself remains untouched, and awareness is like that sky. Thoughts move through it, but awareness itself remains still beneath the movement. The moment you realize this, something inside you begins relaxing. Now you no longer feel forced to solve every thought. You no longer feel required to answer every fear. You no longer treat every mental story like an emergency. And slowly, the mind begins losing its control over your emotional state. Because the truth is, many thoughts only survive because of your constant reaction to them. Without fear, many thoughts fade quickly. Without resistance, many emotions naturally pass. Without obsession, many mental storms lose their power. This does not mean life suddenly becomes silent forever. Thoughts will still come. Fear may still visit sometimes. Painful emotions may still rise. But now, you are no longer drowning inside every mental wave that appears. Now there is space between you and the thought. And inside that space, peace begins growing again. Not because you defeated the mind through force, but because you finally stopped feeding the battle. The voice inside your head is not who you are. It is only the noise you learned to obey. One of the most life-changing truths in Buddhism is this: you are not the voice inside your head. You are the one listening to it. Most people spend their entire lives believing every thought that appears in the mind. If the voice says, "You are not enough," they believe it. If the voice says, "You are failing in life," they carry that fear all day long. If the voice says, "Nobody truly cares about you," they emotionally collapse inside. The voice speaks, and people obey automatically. without questioning, without observing, without realizing that the mind has been repeating learned patterns for years, and slowly, the voice becomes stronger than reality itself. This is why some people can receive love, yet still feel unloved. They can achieve success, yet still feel worthless. They can be surrounded by peace, yet still feel anxious, because the voice inside their head keeps narrating a painful version of reality. And after hearing that voice long enough, they begin confusing the voice with their identity. But think carefully about this. The voice changes constantly. Some days it says you are confident, other days it says you are broken. One moment it feels hopeful, another moment it feels terrified. Sometimes it judges people, sometimes it judges you. Sometimes it speaks with fear, sometimes with anger, sometimes with insecurity, sometimes with shame. If the voice changes every day, how can it be who you truly are? Buddhism teaches that the mind is full of temporary movement. Thoughts constantly rise and disappear like waves in the ocean. But beneath those waves, there is awareness, stillness, presence, a silent observer that has been with you your entire life. Even when your emotions changed, that awareness remained. Even during heartbreak, something inside you was watching the pain. Even during anxiety, something inside you noticed the anxiety. Even during sadness, something deeper quietly observed the sadness. That deeper awareness is not damaged by every thought passing through the mind. But most people never notice this deeper part of themselves because they are hypnotized by mental noise. The voice became so loud, they forgot how to observe it. From childhood, people are conditioned to obey the mind automatically. Society teaches them to chase thoughts, fear thoughts, react to thoughts, identify with thoughts. Very few people are taught to simply observe the mind calmly. So the voice becomes the master, and the human being becomes the servant. The mind says, compare yourself, and immediately suffering begins. The mind says, think about what could go wrong, and fear takes over the body. The mind says, replay the past again, and old pain returns emotionally, as if it is happening right now. This is why unconscious thinking becomes such a powerful prison. Not because thoughts are always true, but because people stop questioning them. The mind keeps speaking, and awareness falls asleep. Buddhism teaches that awakening begins the moment you stop blindly obeying every thought the mind creates. The moment you begin observing the voice, its control starts weakening. Now, when a fearful thought appears, you notice it, instead of instantly becoming it. Now, when the mind insults you, there is a small space between awareness and the thought, and inside that space, freedom quietly begins, because now you realize a thought is only a thought, not a command, not absolute truth, not your deepest identity. This realization changes the entire relationship you have with your mind. Now the voice may still speak, but it no longer controls your entire emotional world automatically. And this is deeply freeing, because many people have spent years suffering under the voice of a mind that was never speaking with complete truth to begin with. The mind often speaks through fear, through conditioning, through past wounds, through insecurity learned long ago. Sometimes the voice inside your head is not even truly yours. It is made from years of other people's opinions, criticism, expectations, rejection, and emotional pain. A parent's harsh words, a teacher's judgment, a painful breakup, years of comparison, years of failure, years of trying to feel accepted. All of this slowly shapes the voice inside the mind. And after enough repetition, people begin believing, this is just who I am. But Buddhism teaches that your deepest nature is not the noise. Your deepest nature is awareness itself, quiet, present, untouched beneath the movement of thought. The mind may become angry, awareness notices. The mind may become afraid, awareness notices. The mind may become anxious, jealous, ashamed, or overwhelmed. Yet awareness itself remains still beneath all of it, like the sky remaining untouched while storms pass through it. This is why meditation in Buddhism is not about destroying thoughts. It is about seeing thoughts clearly. watching them rise, watching them pass, watching the voice without becoming trapped inside it. And slowly, the more awareness grows, the weaker the voice becomes, not because the mind disappears forever, but because you finally stop treating every thought like your true self. And for the first time in your life, you begin experiencing a silence deeper than the voice, a peace deeper than thinking, a presence that was always there beneath the noise, waiting for you to notice it. Overthinking quietly steals your presence, your peace, and the life happening in front of you. One of the saddest things about overthinking is that most people do not realize what it is truly stealing from them. They think overthinking only creates stress. They think it only causes anxiety, emotional exhaustion, or mental pressure. But overthinking steals something much deeper than that. It steals your connection to life itself. Because while your body is physically here, your attention is somewhere else almost all the time. Lost in tomorrow, lost in regret, lost in imagined conversations, lost in problems that may never even happen. The mind becomes so busy replaying the past and predicting the future that the present moment slowly disappears unnoticed. And this is how many people spend years alive without fully experiencing life. They walk through beautiful moments while mentally absent. They sit with people they love while emotionally distracted. They wake up each morning carrying yesterday's thoughts before the day even begins. Even peaceful moments become difficult to enjoy because the mind never truly rests. A person may finally reach a calm moment in life, yet the mind still searches for something wrong, still searches for danger, still searches for reasons to worry. This is why overthinking feels endless. The mind believes constant thinking keeps you safe. It believes if it analyzes enough, predicts enough, replays enough, then somehow it can prevent pain from happening. But most of the time, overthinking does not protect your life. It only steals your ability to fully live it. Many people are no longer experiencing reality directly. They are experiencing reality through non-stop mental commentary. The mind keeps narrating everything. What if this goes wrong? What if they leave? What if I fail? What if I embarrass myself? What if something bad happens later? And because this mental noise never stops, the nervous system never fully relaxes. The body stays tense. The chest stays heavy. The mind stays restless, even when no real danger exists in the present moment. This is one of the deepest traps of overthinking. The mind turns imagined problems into emotional reality. A future that has not happened yet creates real anxiety inside the body. A memory from years ago creates real sadness right now. An imaginary conversation creates real anger. The mind constantly pulls attention away from what is actually happening and drags it into mental worlds that only exist inside thought. And slowly, people stop noticing life itself. They stop noticing the sky, the silence of morning, the feeling of breathing calmly, the warmth of human connection, the beauty hidden inside ordinary moments, because the mind is too busy somewhere else. Buddhism teaches that suffering grows the moment attention leaves the present moment and becomes trapped inside thought, because reality only exists here, not in tomorrow, not in imagination, not inside the endless stories of the mind, only here, in this breath, in this moment, in this experience happening right now. But overthinking constantly pulls awareness away from the present because the ego believes peace exists somewhere in the future. It says, once everything is solved, then I can finally relax. But life never becomes completely problem-free. There will always be uncertainty, always change, always moments beyond your control. And if your peace depends on controlling the future completely, peace will never arrive. This is why so many people feel emotionally exhausted without understanding why. Their mind never stops working. Even when their body rests, their mind continues running endlessly, thinking, predicting, worrying, comparing, replaying, judging, and over time, this constant mental activity disconnects people from themselves. A person may smile outwardly while internally feeling absent from their own life. The days begin blending together, moments pass quickly, time feels faster and faster, and suddenly years disappear while the mind was too distracted to fully experience them. This is why Buddhism places such deep importance on awareness of the present moment, because presence reconnects you to reality. Presence interrupts the endless movement of unconscious thinking. Presence reminds you that life is not happening inside your thoughts. It is happening now, here, in front of you. The moment you truly become present, something inside the body begins calming naturally. Not because every problem disappears, but because awareness finally stops carrying the weight of imaginary futures and endless mental noise. You begin noticing small things again. The sound of rain, the feeling of breathing, the stillness of silence, the simple peace hidden inside ordinary life. And slowly, the mind loses some of its control over your attention, because awareness is no longer completely hypnotized by thought. This does not mean the mind will suddenly become silent forever. Thoughts will still appear, worries may still come, but now there is space between you and the thinking. Now you notice when the mind begins pulling you away from the present, and that awareness changes everything. Because overthinking survives by stealing your attention unconsciously. But the moment awareness returns to the present, the mind loses the power to completely trap you inside itself. And for the first time in a long time, you begin truly living your life again, instead of only thinking about it. The mind never finds rest, because it keeps searching outside for what was always missing within. The human mind is always searching for something to achieve, something to own, someone to love, someone to impress, some future moment where life will finally feel complete. Most people secretly believe that peace exists somewhere outside themselves. They believe happiness is waiting in the next relationship, the next achievement, the next amount of money, the next version of themselves. So the mind keeps chasing endlessly. It says, once I get this, then I'll finally feel enough. Once people accept me, then I'll finally feel peace. Once my life becomes perfect, then I'll finally be happy. And because of this, the mind never truly rests. Even after achieving one goal, it quickly creates another. Even after receiving love, it still fears abandonment. Even after success, it still fears failure. Because the problem was never only external. The deeper problem was the inner emptiness the mind kept trying to escape from. This is one of the greatest illusions human beings live inside. They spend years trying to fill an internal emptiness using external things. But external things constantly change. People change, relationships change, money changes, beauty changes, life changes. Nothing outside remains stable forever. And if your peace depends completely on unstable things, your peace will always feel unstable too. This is why so many people achieve things they once dreamed about, yet still feel restless inside. The mind immediately moves the finish line. Now it wants more validation, more attention, more control, more certainty. The ego survives through endless dissatisfaction, because if the mind became fully content in the present moment, the endless chasing would stop. And the ego fears stillness. It fears simplicity. It fears the realization that peace was never hiding in external achievement to begin with. Buddhism teaches that craving is one of the deepest roots of suffering. The mind constantly says, this moment is not enough. This version of you is not enough. You need something more before you can finally rest. And because people believe this voice, they spend their entire lives emotionally running toward pleasure, running away from discomfort, running toward validation, running away from loneliness. But no matter how far they run, the mind keeps carrying the same emptiness inside. This is why some people feel deeply lonely even while surrounded by others. Why some people feel emotionally empty even after success. Why some people receive love, yet still feel unworthy of being loved. Because external things cannot permanently heal inner disconnection. The mind keeps searching outside because it has forgotten how to sit peacefully within itself. Most people were never taught how to simply exist without chasing something, without comparing, without proving themselves, without constantly needing more. So the nervous system becomes addicted to seeking, always waiting for the next thing, always believing peace exists somewhere else. But Buddhism teaches something incredibly freeing. Peace is not something you chase. Peace is something you uncover when the chasing finally slows down. It was never completely absent. It was buried beneath mental noise, fear, craving, comparison, and endless desire. The mind kept saying, more, 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 while the heart quietly wanted rest. This is why moments of true presence feel so healing. Because for a brief moment, the endless searching stops, and suddenly life feels lighter again. Not because the world became perfect, but because the mind stopped resisting the present moment for a little while. The truth is, many people are not exhausted because life is too difficult. They are exhausted because the mind never allows them to rest emotionally. Even during peaceful moments, the mind keeps searching for what is missing, instead of appreciating what already exists. This constant craving disconnects people from the beauty already surrounding them. A peaceful evening becomes invisible because the mind is worried about tomorrow. Love becomes invisible because the mind is focused on fear. Small blessings become invisible because the ego keeps demanding something bigger before allowing happiness. And slowly, life starts feeling emotionally empty. Not because life contains no beauty, but because the mind trained itself to only focus on what is absent. Buddhism teaches that freedom begins when awareness returns to the present, instead of constantly chasing fulfillment outside itself. Because the deepest peace does not come from becoming someone else. It does not come from finally controlling everything. It does not come from endless achievement. It comes from finally realizing that your worth was never missing in the first place. The mind created the feeling of incompleteness, then spent years trying to solve the emptiness it created itself. But awareness changes everything. The moment you stop constantly searching outside yourself for identity, value, and emotional completion, a deep inner stillness slowly begins returning. Now you can enjoy life without needing it to complete you. Now you can love people without making them responsible for your inner peace. Now you can appreciate success without building your identity around it. Now the heart begins resting in the present moment, instead of endlessly chasing another future that promises happiness. And for the first time in a very long time, the mind becomes quieter, not because you finally obtained everything you wanted, but because you finally stopped believing that peace was somewhere outside you all along. True freedom begins the moment you observe the mind without becoming lost inside it. Most people believe freedom means having a perfect life. No fear, no sadness, no anxiety, no painful thoughts. But Buddhism teaches something completely different. True freedom is not the absence of thoughts. True freedom is the ability to observe the mind without becoming trapped inside everything it creates. Because the mind will always produce movement. Thoughts will continue appearing. Some thoughts will be peaceful. Some will be fearful. Some will carry doubt. Some will carry anger. Some will carry sadness. This is part of being human. The problem is not that thoughts exist. The problem begins when awareness disappears inside them completely. Most people do not observe their thoughts. They become their thoughts. The mind says, "You are failing," and immediately they emotionally become the failure. The mind says, "Something bad is going to happen," and instantly fear takes control of the body. The mind says, "You are not enough," and their entire mood changes. This happens because awareness becomes lost inside mental activity unconsciously. People stop seeing thoughts as temporary experiences. Instead, they treat every thought like absolute truth. And this is how the mind quietly controls human life. Not through force, but through unconscious identification. The mind creates a thought, and the person immediately becomes emotionally attached to it, without questioning it, without observing it, without realizing that thoughts constantly change every single day. But Buddhism teaches that awakening begins the moment you step back internally and simply observe, not judge, not suppress, not fight, just observe. The moment a fearful thought appears, instead of immediately drowning inside it, you notice it calmly. You see it clearly. You recognize the mind is creating fear right now. That small moment of awareness changes everything. Because now you are no longer completely merged with the thought. Now there is space. And inside that space, freedom quietly begins growing. For most of life, people live automatically. Thought appears, reaction follows instantly, emotion rises, behavior follows instantly. Everything happens unconsciously. But awareness interrupts this automatic cycle. Now, when anger appears, you notice it before it fully controls you. When anxiety appears, you recognize the mental pattern instead of blindly following it. When sadness appears, you allow yourself to feel it without turning it into your identity. This is the beginning of inner peace, not because life becomes perfect, but because awareness becomes stronger than unconscious reaction. Most suffering grows because people resist their inner experience constantly. They resist fear, resist sadness, resist uncertainty, resist uncomfortable emotions. But resistance keeps the mind trapped in struggle. Buddhism teaches that awareness transforms experience not through force, but through presence. The moment you fully observe a thought without feeding it, its power weakens naturally. The moment you observe fear without panicking, fear begins passing more quickly. The moment you stop fighting every emotion, the nervous system slowly relaxes. Because awareness creates space around mental activity, and space changes everything. Imagine clouds moving through the sky. Some clouds are dark, some are heavy, some bring storms, but the sky itself remains untouched. Awareness is like that sky. Thoughts and emotions move through it continuously, but awareness itself remains still beneath the movement. This is why meditation in Buddhism is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming conscious. It is about finally seeing the mind clearly instead of being controlled by it unconsciously. For the first time in life, you begin realizing, I can observe this thought without becoming trapped inside it. That realization is powerful, because now thoughts lose some of their authority over you. Fear may still appear, but it no longer completely owns your attention. Pain may still visit, but it no longer defines your identity. The mind may still create noise, but awareness no longer believes every word automatically, and slowly, something inside you begins softening. The inner battle becomes quieter. The constant reaction begins slowing down. The emotional exhaustion starts fading little by little. Because awareness brings stillness back into the nervous system. This is why truly conscious people often appear calmer. Not because they never experience difficulty, but because they no longer become completely consumed by every mental storm passing through them. They have learned how to stay present while thoughts move. They have learned how to witness emotions without drowning inside them. They have learned how to remain connected to awareness even during uncertainty. And this changes the entire experience of life, because now the mind is no longer your prison. It becomes something you can observe peacefully, something you can understand, something you no longer fear. The thoughts still come, the emotions still rise, life still changes, but awareness remains quiet, present, steady beneath the movement. And the more deeply you rest in that awareness, the freer you become, not because the world suddenly stops being difficult, but because you are finally no longer losing yourself inside every thought the mind creates. That is where true freedom begins. Not outside you, not someday in the future, but in the simple moment awareness wakes up and finally sees the mind clearly without becoming trapped inside it anymore. And maybe, for the first time in your life, you can finally see what was happening all along. The mind never truly stopped talking. It kept pulling you into fear, into overthinking, into old memories, into imagined futures, into endless noise that slowly stole your peace without you even realizing it. And after listening to that voice for so many years, you started believing the noise was who you were. But now something inside you sees differently. Now you understand that thoughts are not commands. Fear is not identity. Pain is not the deepest truth about you. The mind may still create storms, but you are no longer completely lost inside them. Because beneath all the noise, something quieter has always existed. A silent awareness that watches everything. An awareness untouched by every passing thought, untouched by every emotional wave, untouched by every moment of fear, shame, anxiety, or confusion. That quiet presence has been with you your entire life. Even in your darkest moments, even when your mind felt heavy, Even when you felt emotionally exhausted and disconnected from yourself, it was always there, waiting patiently beneath the noise. And maybe that is why this realization feels emotional, because deep inside, part of you is finally remembering what peace feels like again. Not fake peace, not temporary distraction, but a deeper peace that appears when you stop fighting yourself constantly. A peace that appears when awareness finally returns to the present moment. The world may still remain noisy. Life may still remain uncertain. People may still come and go. Difficult moments may still exist. But now, you no longer have to lose yourself inside every thought that passes through your mind. Now there is space. Space to breathe. Space to observe. Space to remain present even while thoughts move through you. And inside that space, freedom quietly begins growing. So tonight, do not try to force the mind to become silent. Do not fight every thought. Do not hate yourself for overthinking. Simply notice. Notice the voice. Notice the patterns. Notice the way the mind constantly tries pulling you away from this moment. And gently return your awareness back to the present again and again, because healing does not happen in one perfect moment. It happens slowly. Every time awareness wakes up, every time you stop blindly obeying the noise, every time you remember that you are not the storm inside your head, you are the awareness quietly watching it pass. And maybe that awareness is who you truly were all along. If this message reached something deep inside you, take a quiet moment tonight and simply sit with yourself. No distractions, no pressure, no need to fix everything all at once. Just breathe and notice the difference between you and the voice inside your head. And if this video helped you feel a little more understood, a little more aware, or a little less alone in your struggle with overthinking, then gently subscribe to the channel and continue this journey with us. There are still many truths about the mind, peace, suffering, and awareness waiting to be discovered together. And until the next video, protect your peace, stay present, and do not lose yourself inside the noise.